Hi everyone, welcome back to the channel. We are nearly at the end of the year now and it's time for one of my, for me, most anticipated videos, but also one of the ones that's been the most difficult for me. This is going to be my top 10 favourite books that I have read in 2022. So if you've seen any of my recent videos, you'll know that it has been, for me, quite a stellar year. I have read nearly 80 books. The year isn't yet over and I anticipate finishing at least one more book before 2023 rolls around. But it has been the best year that I've had in terms of reading, and not just in quantity but also in quality, where I've given out 15 5-star ratings and a whole host of 4 and 4.5-star ratings as well. So narrowing that lot down into a 10 title list for my favourite books of the year was really a struggle for me, and the most difficult choices were at the top and at the bottom of that scale, trying to decide between 2, maybe 3 titles which one is deserving of the number 1 spot, but also at the other end which title deserves to be in the list and which one doesn't quite make it. In the end, as far as that one goes, I did go with the book that has had the most impact on me, the one that I still think about a little bit more than the other one, and have decided to carry on that kind of idea throughout the list as well when making those tough decisions. So rather than rambling, let's get on and see what my favourite 10 books of 2022 were. So as I say, number 10 was a really tough choice for me in between 2 titles, which one to leave out and which one to keep in. And because I said I've gone with the one that has given me the most pause for thought, the one that I've talked about the most, and the one that has had the most impact on me, partly I guess due to circumstance, I've gone for Fire of the Forebears by L.A. Buck. I really enjoyed this. That's a given because it's on my top 10 list of my favourite books of the year. I read this one for SPFBO, and where I say the circumstances maybe played into it, I've definitely talked about this title a lot more than some others because I've been talking with regards to SPFBO. So this is one of the finalists now, and I'm really pleased that it's made it that far, and I can't wait for more people to read it both within and without the competition so I can see how it does and just see what other people think about it. I really liked the story here. You've got themes of rebellion, you've got family and found family. I really love the world building in here though. It's one of the things that really spoke to me when I was reading this book. You've got all sorts of creatures. I like the way that centaurs play a big part in it. They're not just bit part characters there in the background. You have centaurs who are actually characters who play a part in this story, and I really appreciate that. But you have other creatures as well, with the Saja and I think it's the Noskaina, with talking bears and big cats and all things like that. It made for a really interesting world. So Fire of the Forebears by L.A. Buck is number 10 in my list. In 9th place, it's an audiobook that I listened to. This is the Written by Bengali Book 1 of Emaneska. And with some of the titles on this list, where I listened on audio, the audio and the narration in particular has really played an impact on its position in this list. And that's definitely something that I can say for the Written. I had a really good time listening to this because the narrator just did a fantastic job that really worked for me. So with this one, I love that you've got a real classic fantasy vibe. You've got so many tropes in here, and people sometimes talk about tropes in fantasy as if they're a bad thing, but essentially that's what fantasy is. It is full of tropes. If you took all the tropes away, you wouldn't have anything left. So tropes are definitely not a bad thing, and there's plenty of them here, and most of them are done really well. There's a whole gamut of creatures in this one too, but they're more your typical creatures with werewolves or lycans as they are, vampires and things like that. You've also got dragons and dragon riders, which of course is a personal favourite of a fantasy nut like me. I liked the writing, I liked the story, I really enjoyed the characters that you got in here, and I can't wait to continue this series and to see where it goes and whether it can actually scale even higher heights or whether the Written is the best of them. That all remains to be seen, and I'm here for it. In 8th place, we've got another book that's got a real classic fantasy vibe to it. This is The Blood of the Spear by Mark Timoney, Book 1 of The Eye of Eternity. This is one of the more recent reads I've got, and it does perhaps benefit from a bit of proximity bias because I'm remembering more about this than books that I read right at the start of the year. That's just natural. But I love the way that this is a book that moves really quickly, but not too quickly. It's really, really nicely paced for a reader like me. I said it's got classic fantasy vibes, but it's one of those greats that I've come across recently where you've got that vibe, but it's approached with a modern flair, and I really love that combination. So with this one, I agree with my friend Nico, who recently reviewed this, and I'll link his review in the top corner there. The story and all of the character and plot development that you get in this single volume here would often take other writers 2 or 3 novels to get to. It's not a massive book, it's a good size fantasy book, but it packs a whole lot into here, and you don't have to wait around. But as I said, the pacing is really nicely done. It doesn't feel rushed at all. It just feels like a really masterful story, really well written. In 7th place, and talking about masterful stories and really well written things, I've chosen a novella which is a real rarity for me, but this one isn't any novella, it's a beast of a novella, practically a novel in its own right. This is The Exile by Ryan Carhill, book 2.5 of The Bound and the Broken. So I'm loving this series and I'm loving what Ryan's doing, and it's another one of those real classic fantasy vibes with a modern writing style that I absolutely love. So that's why you can see there are already 3 of those that have had that kind of description within this list. The Exile is an absolutely fantastic tale. If you've read The Bound and the Broken, or in particular of Darkness and Light, there's a new character introduced in there, and this novella really explores that character and gives all of the background and further depth to him, and it is absolutely brilliant for that. It's a great addition to the world, but for that one character, it just makes him sing so much more. It's a great story in multiple parts, showing different times in the character's life, and it works really, really well. In 6th place, I've chosen We Are the Dead by Mike Shackle, book 1 of The Last War. This is one of the ones that I read earlier in the year, and it stuck with me because I had such a good time with it, even though I've not as yet continued with the series. I will be doing that soon. I love the themes of rebellion that you get in here. I thought they were really, really well done. You've got different kind of levels of it, from people just kind of in the streets who are fighting back because they want to do something, they want to be seen to be doing something, to the people who are doing it kind of properly, you might say, in the shadows, plotting for the one big movement. And I love the way that all of those different kind of threads are integrated. You get to see both sides of the story here with the focus on the rebellion side of it, but you do get to see the other side as well, and I definitely appreciate that. It's really well written, it's got great characters in it, including one of my favourite new characters of the year, and I can't wait to continue with this one. In 5th place, I've got the sci-fi pick. This one is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. This is another one that I listened to on audio, and I really appreciated it for that. It's probably the one out of all of the audiobooks I listened to that I would imagine had the least kind of difference between the written word and the spoken word. It's just one particular thing with one character which works really well on audio, and I can't imagine how that would be in the written word. I really enjoyed the movie The Martian, and I love the humour that you got in there, and that's very much what you get in Project Hail Mary as well, so it really worked well for me. I'm not normally a fan of the amnesia trope, but this one did it really well. I loved the character waking up not knowing who he was, where he was, what he was doing, and what he did basically to find answers to each of those questions, and how little things gradually jogged his memory and brought those back to him. The main character is a scientist, and the kind of mission that he is on, the project that he's undertaking, I guess, is a very science-based one, and the science was delivered in a really good way. For someone like me who doesn't know a lot of the things that were being spoken about, they were explained in a really good way, a really simple way that didn't go over my head whatsoever. The whole story was really nicely rounded. I loved the way that it was almost told in a back to front fashion as he gained more and more memories and got right to the crux of things, of where he was going and what he was doing and why. And altogether it led to one of the best reading experiences I had this year. We get into the pointy end of the scale now, and in fourth place I have The Iron Crown by L.L. McRae. Again, this is one of the earlier titles that I read back in, I think, February of this year, and it has stuck to me as one of my favourites, not just of this year but of recent years. Again, this one deals with the amnesia trope but does it in a really interesting way. I love finding out kind of why our character has amnesia and what happened to lead to that, but I like what you get with the other characters in here as well. A personal favourite of all of the things that I read this year is you have a character who, through a curse, has no feelings whatsoever, and she will literally walk on broken glass, for instance, and it will cut into her feet and she will not feel it. She can't taste things as well, so she doesn't know necessarily what she's eating. It's a really interesting concept, and I thought it was dealt with very well in this book. The story as a whole was great. There were some fantastic scenes that left me on the metaphorical edge of my seat, and I loved it for that. I can't wait for the second volume of this to come out and to read more about these characters. I have experienced a little bit more with the prequel novella, The Citrine Key, and I definitely recommend reading them back to back, with the novella first and then this beauty next. In third place, I've got one of the big ones that I read this year in terms of the page count. I'm only going to show off half of it here, but it is Words of Radiance by Brandon Sanderson, book 2 of the Stormlight Archive. This is another audio that I did, but I did this one via graphic audio and absolutely loved it. It was my first experience of graphic audio. It might as well have been my first experience of Brandon Sanderson, because it had been about 10 years since I read my last Sanderson novel, and I absolutely loved it. The graphic audio was a revelation for me, and it did very, very well. I don't like the kind of original audio with Michael Kramer and Kate Redding, so I was left with the choice of reading this series, but the graphic audio gave me another option, and I loved it for that. The story is great, the characters are great, I love the world that you've got in here. It's a very strange world, not the kind of normal world that I will go for, but I think it's delivered very well, and quite frankly, there's already been, by this point, enough pages to put across that world that you feel really at home in it because you know so much about it. It's all been so very well described. But I love the action that you get in here. It is so tense in so many different moments, and I'm looking forward to more of that as I continue my Stormlight Archive journey. So into my top two, and this was another of the really, really difficult choices. I went back and forth between these two for quite a while, but I made my decision and I'll explain to you why. In second place, I've gone for Along the Razor's Edge by Rob J. Hayes, book 1 in the War Eternal. Again, this was an audiobook that was a revelation for me. The narrator did such a fantastic job. We've got a really, really foul-mouthed protagonist in here, and the narrator did such a good job putting her across. I really felt like I knew the character, and that's a testament to both the writing style and also the reading style. As far as the story goes, you've got a bit of an isolated setting here. Again, it's a bit of a strange one because you don't have your normal kind of fantasy world, or maybe you do, but we spend almost the entirety of this book down underground, so you don't get to see that world. With that does leave two things really. You've got the characters and you've got the plot to put across this story, and it's done really, really well. I absolutely loved my time reading this. I've enjoyed carrying on with the series, and I'm looking forward to savouring the last two books that I've got to get to in this series as well. Which leaves me with my favourite book of the year. Now, this one, there's a couple of different things that came into it. As I've mentioned, you've got the overall feeling of how much I enjoyed the story, but you've also got, as I explained before, the impact that it's left on me and how much I've thought about it since reading it. So with all of those things combined, I've gone with Bonds of Chaos by Zach Argyle, book 3 in his Threadlight series. So part of the reason that I enjoyed this so much is because it brought to a close a series that I have really, really loved since I picked up Voice of War. I thought this closed down the series so well. It was a really sad story in parts. It was a really exciting story in parts. I loved pretty much every minute of this, and I blasted through this entire thing in a day. So that shows how much I loved it, how easy it was to read, how enthralling it was to keep the pages turning. I loved the roller coaster of emotions that I got as I was reading this, as I experienced real highs and lows moving from chapter to chapter. So the series as a whole is definitely one of my favourites, and as the last book in the trilogy, Bonds of Chaos definitely benefits from that. So if you haven't read Threadlight by Zach Argyle, the trilogy is now finished. It's all available in physical, digital and audio format. What are you waiting for? Go out and read this. So there's my top 10 of 2022. I had such a great year reading all of these and so many other titles as well that didn't make it into this list. Let me know in the comments down below what you thought of these and what are your top 10 or some of those that you enjoyed the most this year. Now I have made a change to my planned scheduling. This video I'm filming at the moment on Christmas Eve, and this will be going up just after Christmas for you because I don't want to spoil the results I guess in another video that's going to come later. So I'll say to you now, thank you so much to everyone who supported me this year. It's been a great year for me. I hope it's been a great year for you. Have yourself a wonderful end of the year, whoever and wherever you are, whatever you believe, whatever you celebrate and how you celebrate it. I hope you have an excellent one. Take care of yourselves, read some good books, and I'll see you next time.